So last night on Raw, Triple H introduced the brand new WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Now, the story behind this, which is both a real life story and a behind the scenes story, is that Roman Reigns wants to hit 1,000 days, but also Roman Reigns has negotiated himself into working less dates per year, which is true. Because Roman Reigns worked so much during the pandemic, I remember hearing that when they came back from the pandemic, like right before in the middle of 2021, he wanted to take a break. So the company asked him to come back and work a bit more, and then they'll start to lighten his schedule. Well, now it's kind of come to the point where he really wants to work less. And instead of it being a situation where we have another year without like a quote unquote world title match, now that both titles have been unified for over a year, Roman did it when he beat Brock at WrestleMania last year. The idea here is there's concern because they don't have a champion on either show. You have your Intercontinental and US champion, and Roman Reigns is still a SmackDown wrestler, but he's not on television frequently enough to where it can really be worth it. So the idea here is that instead, what they were going to do is create a new world title, and instead of stripping Roman of one of the current two titles that he has, the WWE Undisputed, Heavyweight Championship of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, instead they chose to make a brand new WWE World Heavyweight Title, which is basically it's in the shape of the original big gold NWA WCW World Title, but it's got a big WWE logo in the middle. I like the way it looks. I don't love it as much as the original World Heavyweight Title. That's a beautiful big gold is a beautiful title. But I really do like that they did this because it gives the other brand that Roman's not going to end up on a chance to have a champion and a chance to main event pay-per-views without it being like a gimmick match or without it being like, a Money in the Bank or a Royal Rumble or maybe just a US title match, something like that, a traction match. It gives them a chance to really create a new prestige going forward. Now, because of this, I don't think they're going to de-unify Roman Reigns' championships. I remember there was talk about them doing that, but I don't expect that to happen. And I think the reason why is just because he's had it for so long, he's made it more prestigious. They probably figure, well, let's go ahead and just make a new world title. Now, at some point down the road, maybe they will unify all the titles once again, but I'm not sure about that because there's been times in WWE history where we've had one world champion. That in 2002, really in '01 when the WCW title came over during the invasion angle, but in '02 we had two world champions when the brand split happened. So this idea is more so not so much about the brand split, but about Roman Reigns' schedule. You understand? If the WWE title was not on Roman Reigns and if it was on somebody on Raw, different story. But they don't want to beat Roman Reigns. And that was the argument I was making towards WrestleMania is beating Roman Reigns now is a little bit too soon because whoever beats Roman Reigns for both the titles, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a huge moment because the dude's about to hit 1,000 days as champion. So, with that being said, I like the idea behind it. I think it makes sense, and it's actually one that I think later on they could always unify, but I think it's one that I didn't even think about. So the question is, who's going to be the WWE World Heavyweight Champion coming up in the Night of Champions pay-per-view? Now we know why it changed over from being the King and Queen of the Ring to the Night of Champions. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to still do the one-night tournament or if they're going to do like, a tournament going into the show, but there's obviously going to be three guys that I think are going to be in line for it. Now, I want to say this. We don't know where Roman Reigns is going to go yet because the draft starts on SmackDown this week. However, I can tell you that I believe, based on the fact that Raw is 3 hours and SmackDown is 2 hours, that Roman Reigns is probably better suited for SmackDown because Raw really does need that world title angle to fill out those 3 hours. And SmackDown, is only 2 hours and it's been kind of like Roman's show. Although I do still think that when the big pay-per-views are coming, like your WrestleManias, maybe even your SummerSlams, your Royal Rumbles, you're going to have Roman on Raw on some weeks. But I think it makes sense because for so long, guys, we've been conditioned to having the champion on television since pretty much right before the Attitude Era. We've had the champion either defending on TV because, they were in the Monday Night War and they had to have world title matches on TV because of that, or, every few months on TV, or doing angles. But Roman's not there too often. And because of that, it makes sense, right? So to me, there's three guys. Now, I'm going to go through the three guys who I think are most likely to get it. And I'm going to go through who I don't think is going to get it out of those three guys. And I'm going to go through what they could do. Okay, so the three guys I have in mind is Bobby Lashley, Seth Rollins, and Cody Rhodes. Let me explain each one. Seth Rollins, I think, is a great choice. He's really carried Raw as far as being the workhorse of that brand. He was a great champion when he was up until his title reign in 2019 wasn't that great, but he was a great champion, I would say, like I said, up until the Bray Wyatt Fiend feud. But enough time has passed, I think, to where he's been rebuilt enough to he could be a credible champion again. I think he's definitely a top guy, carried that brand. Second guy's Bobby Lashley. Now, Bobby Lashley was a credible world champion back, a couple years ago in 2021. So in 2021, he had a really good title reign. I really liked it. I thought that I was surprised he beat Drew at Mania. And by the way, Drew McIntyre's another guy who actually could win this thing. That's another guy who he's the third guy who I think has a possibility, but he did just lose to Walter, so they had to rebuild him, but I could see him getting this. But the reason why I'm picking Bobby Lashley is because I liked his title reign, and he was even a heel back then. He lost to Big E, of course, who would lose to Brock and then lose to Roman. But Bobby Lashley has pretty much been, in many ways, alongside Seth Rollins, the top face on Raw. He really has. And we know he can carry the title. We know he's a good worker. We know that he's over with the fans. So I don't see why not. I don't see why not go with him. Now, I want to talk about Cody Rhodes. I do not think Cody Rhodes is going to win this title. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. While I think that a lot of fans are going to pick Cody Rhodes because of the story of him finishing the story, that's not the title he wants. Remember, the story is that Cody Rhodes wants the title that Dusty Rhodes held up in Madison Square Garden in 1978. That's the title that Cody Rhodes has. If you trace the lineage of that championship, the WWF Heavyweight Championship of the World, going back to Bruno Sammartino, Superstar Billy Graham, Bob Backlund, Iron Sheik, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, later on, of course, Bret Hart, Steve Austin, John Cena, and, yes, Roman Reigns, the one that he's got now. That title is the belt that goes all the way back to that lineage. So if he were to win the World Heavyweight title, it wouldn't complete the story because that's not the title that his dad wanted to win. It didn't even exist when his dad was alive. Because remember, this new title is not the original NWA World Heavyweight title that Dusty Rhodes did win. This is the new WWE World Heavyweight title that's inspired by that belt. So because of that, I feel like Cody's mission to beat Roman Reigns is still going to be the long-term storyline going into WrestleMania next year. I do feel that way. I think they're going to rebuild Cody for that big win at WrestleMania. I think that Cody winning this title would kind of be pointless if he's going to lose it anyways because that's not the story. The story is to beat Roman Reigns. And the fact is that Cody came very close, but he got screwed over by Solo Sikoa. And that story has to continue as well. I don't know what they're going to do with that. It does kind of feel like Cody is not going to feud with Roman again this year. They kind of let it go, and it's unfortunate because I do want Cody Rhodes to get his revenge on Solo. That still has to happen because of what happened with Roman at WrestleMania. But I think Cody should be going after Roman's title. Not necessarily right now, but at some point he should. So to me, I think it makes the most sense. that Bobby Lashley win this championship. Now, what would I do? I had an idea last night of something they could do for a long-term angle. And this is going to take weeks of build-up. You have Bobby win the title at Saudi Arabia. You have Bobby then, at some point later this year, challenge Roman Reigns to unify, right? Yes, listen, just hear me out. I'm not saying to unify, hear me out. They have a match on SmackDown, right? At some point before that, Bobby Lashley reunites the Hurt Business, which has been teased for a year at this point almost. We've been hearing about this for a while. Not a whole year, but, several months, right? So, Bobby has a match with Roman on SmackDown, and the Bloodline come in, Hurt Business come in, boom, 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 schmaz, double DQ. This will lead to a War Games match, either at Survivor Series or another pay-per-view, doesn't matter, between the Hurt Business and the Bloodline. And what you do here is you have the Hurt Business win, but Jay takes the fall. And thus Bobby proves that his group was the more superior group. Roman is, of course, very mad. You get where I'm going with this, right? That, of course, takes us to Bobby then feuding with whoever the next Raw guy is, maybe even Lesnar, because, they haven't finished that off either. Do that, do whatever else you want to do, other challengers, Seth, whomever. On SmackDown, though, the story is now that Roman is physically assaulting Jey Uso for losing. This, of course, leads to Jey leaving the Bloodline and the other ones being in a very awkward position because they're brothers. And one by one, little by little, the Bloodline begins to leave Roman. Little by little. This is weeks and weeks of buildup. Like, you have to go week after week after week slowly, like they did for the Bloodline angle so far with Sami. And that kind of storytelling works. They've proven it. Little by little, right? Till eventually Roman's by himself. Roman is able to defeat the Usos in singles matches and solo. You get the Bloodline story finished, and Roman's like, I don't even need you. And he kind of becomes his own man, right? But then here comes Cody. Cody wins the Rumble. We have our rematch at WrestleMania 40. This time, nobody is there to help Roman Reigns except Paul Heyman. At one point, Paul Heyman gets taken out, either by Cody or by somebody else close to the Rhodes family. I'm not saying Brandy or Dustin, if he's even available, but somebody who's on Cody's side, somebody who hates Roman, whomever. It doesn't matter. It could be Cody himself. Cody gets the 3 crossroads in, maybe even 4 crossroads. 1, 2, 3. Finally, they're thrown to Roman. And then, post-WrestleMania, you give Cody his angle, his feud with somebody else, maybe do rematches, but the eventual post-WrestleMania 40 story should be Roman has to win his family back. And that will eventually lead to a babyface turn. Then at that point, you've got Roman as a face with the Bloodline. This is, of course, months. Like, I'm booking this out like 2 years ahead of time. You know what I mean? Like, we got a while to go for this. Little by little, right? Of course, injuries can change all this, but that's the idea. Eventually leading to maybe a feud with Imperium, if they're still around as heels, and, Roman can be the babyface. They can do a lot of things with this. Then you kind of go off from there and figure it out from there. So I'm putting the piece together to tell you how they can kind of tell this story right without Cody really being buried, to where Cody says, okay, that's a nice title, but I want the belt that my father never had. That's the one I want, which is the one that Roman has, the black one that he has over his shoulder, which, by the way, I do think they need to they should have a new title design at some point. With that being said, I will bring this video to a close. What do you think about my idea and who should be the World Heavyweight Champion? We'll talk soon. Take care.